In his short career so far, Tom King has established himself as a writer willing to try something a bit different. We've spoken about his work on Strip Panel Naked before, with the episodes on the Omega Men, and there's also the episode on the Vision. With Batman issue 14, he takes an interesting approach to Batman and Catwoman's relationship, and opts to heighten the drama and dialogue somewhere above realism. This episode, we're going to take a look primarily at the dialogue beats, and how flow and repetition builds to a particular tone. You're watching Strip Panel Naked, I'm Hass, and I'm going to show you some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. So, Batman issue 14 tells the story of Batman and Catwoman's probable final night together, before Catwoman goes to prison. As such, King elected to make this a personal story of two people connected, taking place over this one night. And to do that, King uses a very particular system of repetition between the dialogue, in that the words of these two characters become kind of intertwined in a carefully constructed rhythm. As an example, let's just go through the dialogue of one of these early pages between them. I say I killed 237 people. You didn't. You say I didn't, because you didn't, but you can't prove I didn't. But I will. No bat, you won't. And skipping a panel, we also get this. You'll run. Why would I run? Because you're you-cat, you run. Yes, and you're you-bat. I run. You catch me. So you can see what I mean. It's not particularly realistic dialogue in a sense, but then again, this is a story about a man who dresses as a bat to chase down super criminals. But there's a very obvious pattern to the dialogue that creates a nice rhythm and flow. We like patterns in our writing and art. Think of any major pop song and they're laden with repetition throughout, particularly with the chorus. There's a great song from the comedian Bo Burnham called Repeat Stuff that explores that a little bit.
Repeat stuff, repeat stuff, repeat stuff, repeat stuff, repeat stuff, repeat stuff.
And it's why most of these pop songs are catchy, and it's why we know most of the choruses before the song even ends. It works by speeding up the process of reading and speaking. So as a reader, when we see something we've already read, our processing time for that is shorter. For example, if each balloon just contained the same words over and over and over and over again, we'd read that really, really quickly because our brain had already processed and taken the time to understand that bit of text. And as you go through more and more, your brain understands that pattern. We talked about something similar in the episode on 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank with the comedy beat panels, where you'll see 4 balloons, 3 all containing the same thing, and the 4th one something different, as it catches you out. It's all about patterns. But if each balloon contains entirely new bits of dialogue, as most comics do, with new bits of rhythm, it's an entirely new thing for your brain to process as you read. And as we say, with flipping it and keeping everything quite similar, it starts to build that tempo because the speed goes faster. And faster tempo makes things more exciting, like your heart beating getting faster and faster and faster with anticipation and excitement. A slower tempo can be more considered and thoughtful, but the main theme behind this issue is Catwoman and Batman's final night together as lovers, and a slower, more thoughtful pace would give the story an entirely different edge. So by opting to go with the faster speed, it's exciting, and it's built up through that repetition. This idea is a foundation of narrative storytelling generally, which is all made up through patterns. For example, if we saw a pattern such as A, B, we can take a stab at what comes next and say C. But if that C never comes and instead we go to A again, that slight change causes surprise. It's what I was talking about earlier with the 4 Kids example. If we went A, B, A, B, our brain again will get used to that pattern. It'll assume it'll go A, B, A, B, A, B, and so on. So if we went A, B, A, B, C, again we get caught off guard and it purposefully breaks the rhythm. So as an example from the same page, in that penultimate panel, we get this repetition with their dialogue, and it's stacked over the top of each other by letterer Clayton Cowles, which again is also a smart move because it makes that dialogue read even quicker. It's all straight there and overlapping. And because by this point we understand that the back and forth nature of the flow of the dialogue, and so on that final panel, when it breaks and becomes one night, you, me, it does catch us as new and different, and it ends up causing additional emphasis and stress on that final moment of dialogue. There's a quote by Gary Provost, who authored the 100 Ways to Improve Your Writing book, that discusses this idea of breaking repetition. He said, "This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length, and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I'm certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important." And that last point is interesting, importance. We've established that there's a pattern being built up and broken, and it happens continuously throughout the issue. But back to the repetition within the dialogue. I mentioned earlier that this isn't realism. People don't speak like this to one another in real life, and clearly that's by design of the book by King. By creating something purposefully abnormal, it naturally ends up being more dramatic. It's not a subtle technique by any means, but it's done to build, again, and I keep mentioning this, but it's so much a part of this particular story, but it's building rhythm and symmetry. It's very powerful at doing that. There's a reason King elected to have Batman and Catwoman wear their costumes in this story, and why Mitch Gerads, the artist, rendered both of their outfits almost identically, and why Cowles, on lettering duty, stacks a lot of their boxes when it comes to these moments of repetition. The whole book is designed around this symmetry between these two characters who are so close to one another, yet opposites. Catwoman later in the book tells a story about the two cats of Kilkenny, a story of two cats who were opposites, yet kind of the same. They both fought each other till their inevitable demise, and were being told this tale because of that symmetry. Two animals, both clattering head on. That story highlights that symmetry, that back and forth nature of their dialogue all throughout this issue, and it gives it powerful resonance. I talk about art a lot on Strip Panel Naked and how it helps the flow and pace of the story, and some of that comes down to the writers building their beats in panel structure and those narrative story moments. But dialogue is just as important, and it can make or break a book. And that's not just dialogue that doesn't feel clumsy or clunky, because honestly you could make an argument that the dialogue in this issue feels clumsy, because it's very heightened and it's got this constant tone, but it's about tempo and pace. Shakespeare, for example, can be hard to read now with its dated dialect and sentence structure. But what it will never lose is flow and pace, because of the iambic pentameter a lot of it is written in. In comics, you don't often get a chance to see dialogue that has a purposeful structure and musicality to it. So Batman issue 14 by Tom King, Mitch Gerads and Clayton Cowles is a perfect example of how dialogue can bring just as much to a story as any other element. Thanks for watching. This episode was sponsored by Jeff M Art, where you can buy some original art from some great comic artists. There's a link in the description for you to go check out the website and see their full range. If you're a fan of the episode, we'd love you to check out and support us on Patreon, where for your pledge you get tons of extra content. For more comics talk and analysis, you can find me on Twitter at HassanOE. And finally, hit subscribe to keep up to date with all the new episodes, and we'll see you next week.